if we do not pass some of this other legislation, because it will cost too much money and the state treasury just cannot afford that. So it is a package. And what we're doing here, let me emphasize again, that this is a constitutional amendment, and it merely, our action in the legislature does nothing but places this problem before the people for either their acceptance or their rejection. We do offer a classification of property. If the people want classification, they will accept it. If they don't want it and they reject it, of course then we will delve farther into the problem for another solution.
I say and suggest to this group of people, and I suggest to the taxpayers and citizens of Alabama, that this is a matter of eminent importance and one which must be dealt with, or else others will deal with it for us. And I know that the legislature sees the merit in selecting its own time and its own place and its own battleground in which to decide the issue and not let it be decided someplace else.
Your problem is not, Mr. Chairman, that farm property is assessed at 15% and utility property is assessed at 30%. Your problem is that one farm is assessed at 5% and one not far away is assessed at 100%. And you think that doesn't happen? I'll tell you it does happen. It does happen because someone who assesses it doesn't know the local assessment customs, and they buy a farm for $10,000 and they know no better than to go in and assess it for that. Your problem is that a commercial building on this corner is assessed on an entirely different basis from one on that corner. Your problem is that a residence on one side of the street is assessed on a different basis from a residence on the other side of the street. And the greatest increase in property taxes in the last 20 years that your committee found was not in farm property, not in utility property, not in commercial property, but in residency. It's the homeowner that's being discriminated against in your property tax if you want to get down and consider it.
Now, we have been confronted and worried with the problem of trying to find sources of new school money. Where will the sources of new school money come from? I suggest to you that it must come from ad valorem taxes, and that if we start this system of classification, as Senator Dumas has pointed out, there will be no end to it.
Examine the prospective revenues coming to the state of Alabama and to determine how those revenues could wisely be spent. But that's not what we're being called upon to do. We're being called upon to take a conditional appropriation and pass it here today and turn over to someone, not necessarily the Board of Education, not the Superintendent of Education, not the legislature, not the Senate Education Committee, not the House Education Committee. We're just to turn over the decision of when this $16-odd million is to be spent and where it's to be spent and at what price that money is to be spent, what promises are to be exacted for the expenditure of some part of that money. And it's going to be an eye-opener some of these days when some of the senators and some of the members of the House of Representatives who may be in favor of this conditional appropriation bill have to go back and face their constituents, and their constituents ask them some very pointed questions. They're going to want to know why it is that you turn over some $16 million in prospective revenues to somebody to appropriate and to spend in whatever manner he or they see fit, without you passing on the wisdom of those appropriations. That, gentlemen, is what we were sent up here for.
All of the program is on the calendar in one house or the other. The appropriation bill's on the Senate calendar and under consideration now. The mental health package and the parks program on the House calendar, ready for consideration there. So, and this is the bulk of the governor's program, or that part that remains for consideration. I think the chances are excellent for passage, as well as some other legislation of general interest that's on the calendar. I think we're in extremely good shape, in fact, to be still 11 days after today from the end of the session and be this far along. Normally the appropriation bills are not considered until the last 2 or 3 days when there's not really adequate time to give consideration to all the aspects of them, and I'm encouraged that the Senate has been able to get the bills on out and begin considering them this early. In the last 4 years, the last administration, we had reapportionment in the House. We had a measure of reapportionment in the Senate then, but the major reapportionment came to the Senate this time. The House is basically the same as far as apportionment is concerned. There may be some slight variation from last time. But generally, I think the legislature has adapted to it. It's no longer a geographical matter of the one section of the state against another section of a state. Now it's a large county, small county line that's drawn generally, and this has not worked to the disadvantage of the people, because all of the people are represented. Neither side has sufficient strength to run over the other side, but each has sufficient strength to keep from being run over. So it's worked out pretty well.
There's quite a bit of controversy over issues such as the appropriations bill, ad valorem taxes, and so forth, with filibusters threatened all along the line on these. Do you think this could tie up the Senate so that these bills don't get passed?
Well, it's a possibility, of course, particularly on bills other than the appropriation bills. I can't conceive of the Senate leaving here at the end of a regular session without having passed the appropriation bills. I do not believe this will happen. But on the ad valorem bills, air pollution bills, things of this nature, it's possible that a general tie-up could ruin the chances of passage of those bills. They're so needed, though, that we need the legislature, the Senate, needs to give consideration to these bills before we adjourn.
you come to the fact that Jacksonville University is going to get $406 per student. Now, you've got Jacksonville University getting $406 a student, and you've got the University of South Alabama getting an average of $2,681 over the next 2 years. By other simple arithmetic, you can see that the University of South Alabama is going to get 6.5 times appropriation per student than is Jacksonville University.
Now, we're not going to continue to put this order up day after day. The administration is attempting to pass the appropriation bills, as we have. It's our obligation to do that. But I would say after today, or maybe one more legislative day, we are going to remove these bills and move on to other measures such as the mental health package and site clearance and a number of other important pieces of legislation that we have to pass. Now, the responsibility for not taking this opportunity is going to fall on those from the urban counties who are filibustering, and not on the administration, because we are making a serious attempt to get these bills up, pass them, get them back to the House so they'll have plenty of time to consider them. There's not any move whatsoever on the part of the administration to wait until the last day and have this mad rush in which these bills cannot be given their proper attention. It appears that the Jefferson County delegation is passing up a wonderful opportunity to accomplish what they have set out to accomplish, and that is, as I understand it, to get the money put back in the general education budget for the four-year school at Birmingham, that's connected with the University of Alabama, and also to control some of the conditional appropriations that might affect the new medical school in Mobile and other money for other schools, and that they have, as we have placed the conditional appropriation bill at the end of the calendar, this has put them in a very favorable position, and that they don't seem to be grabbing this opportunity to take the ball, so to speak, and to accomplish what they've set out to do.
I felt like that you didn't want to report the fact that I was involved in a land sale in Baldwin County without also covering all the facts that I do own some land down there in Crenshaw. It's subdivided into building lots, if you would quote that, and you could state in your article that if anybody's interested that I would give them a price upon request. And I do appreciate Ted Pearson and the Birmingham News making an accurate report. But I hope you also headline tomorrow, Al, if you call in, that I do own 17 acres down there that I'd like to sell to. Thank you, Mr. President, gentlemen.
At 17 in Crenshaw, Senator.
Yes.
Senator, the chair understands the price of that property in Baldwin County has gone up tremendously since high noon today when this issue came out. Therefore, that the governor's desire should be implemented. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the legislature of Alabama, both houses concurring, that all state-supported institutions of higher learning in the state of Alabama are hereby requested to fly the Alabama state flag and the Confederate battle flag alongside the American flag on prominent flagpoles or upon a single flagpole at each football contest held within the state of Alabama by said institution, and that the bands play the Star Spangled Banner, Alabama, and Dixie, respectively, as each flag is hoisted. Sincerely, Lurleen B. Wallace, Governor of Alabama. Senator Crenshaw.
Mr. President, gentlemen, Senate, while it may require some further amendments to the appropriation bill, I believe that the governor's suggested amendment is real good, and I do move that we concur in the executive amendment.
People all over this country are concerned today about radicals who are traveling to communist countries, consorting with the enemy, and then coming home to create more strife and turmoil. Stokely Carmichael, the Black Power advocate, was the latest of these. And as this morning he was still in communist Cuba discussing these matters with Castro. We have had people who travel illegally to North Vietnam and other countries, and under existing laws there's simply nothing that this country can do about these people. Well, I've introduced in the Congress today a bill which will make it a federal offense for any person to violate passport restrictions by traveling to communist countries. The bill would make it punishable by a fine of $5,000 or 5 years in jail or both. And I would certainly hope that this would be a deterrent to these radicals who go into communist countries and consort with the enemy and hurt and destroy all the good things that this country was built upon.
Well, I haven't asked the legislature to recess. There's been a discussion about what you might do and might not do, and I've made no request of that. I have talked with some people about the possibility of saving a few legislative days. There are some legislators who say they would like to have a special session, but it costs too much money to have a special session, and the legislature must pass the bills that have to be passed to run state government because we've been in session. They've been in session since January of this year, and that's long enough to pass whatever bills are necessary to run state government. And if we have a special session of the legislature, it will take all the money in the general fund that we have as a little surplus. And if we were to have to call out the National Guard or pay additional police forces to protect property and people's lives in this state, we would have to then get some money from the people and other sources, and we don't need to do that. No, my wife is getting along fine. The governor feels fine. She's naturally in the post-operative period, and naturally she's not as strong as she was before she had the operation, but the reports that they've sent from Houston are good. We feel good about her, a lot better than when we went to Houston before she had the operation. And we just appreciate the prayers and thoughts of the people of our state. However, my first thought at the present time is her condition and her getting well. And of course, if her health continues to improve, as I think it will, then it would not alter my plans. But of course, if for some unforeseen event she didn't get along well, of course, naturally that would alter my presidential possibilities. Okay. I don't think much of any candidate for either one of the national parties who don't tell us emphatically that they are going to stop the takeover of our public school system, and that they're going to go into the courts and ask that it be turned back to the states, and they're going to take the Justice Department out of the school business, and they're going to appoint judges to the courts of our land who will go by the Constitution. The most serious thing facing the people of this nation is the takeover of the education of our children, their hearts and minds, telling who can teach them, where they can go to school. And this coming August, the last of August and September, we're going to see one of the most confused school situations throughout this nation that you've ever seen. It's not going to be in the interest of any child in this state. And if Mr. Reagan, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Romney, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Humphrey, or any of the rest of them don't say they're going to turn that system back to us, then as far as I'm concerned, they're all the same.
Now, I don't want to go back to my three counties with a sorry record to talk to the people down there about. I want to go back at least with the sense that we have been here and done our best, considered those things that we feel like should be considered. And I think that the people of the state of Alabama are growing a little bit tired of bickering up here, filibustering. I know that some sections it may sound good, and it comes a time when every man has to use that maybe to carry his point. But the extremism and everything, and I think we have almost reached the point of extremism in this Senate with reference to allowing orders to come up which could facilitate and expedite the business of this legislature.
Here is what I think is a flaw in the bill. If a person is stopped and accused of driving under the influence of alcoholic beverages and refuses to take a test, he will proceed through the administrative procedures of the Department of Public Safety, and in all likelihood he will be ruled against, and his refusal will result in the suspension of his driving privilege for 6 months. Now, gentlemen, he hasn't even been convicted of driving while intoxicated at that point. This has been an administrative procedure. If he is convicted of driving while intoxicated in a subsequent proceeding in a court of law, as I understand the law, the maximum period of suspension or revocation is only 6 months.
Correct.
Now, I say to you, it makes little sense to suspend his license for 6 months for refusing to take the test when at that time he hasn't even been convicted of the heinous offense of driving while intoxicated. So I ask this Senate to reduce the 6-month suspension for the mere refusal to take the test to 60 days. I think it makes more sense, and I hope that you'll support it.
It's not sanctioned by the National Labor Relations Board. The company will not recognize it. Those employees that are staying out in violation of the company rules. That we believe that they've been taken in by union propaganda, pie in the sky, that they cannot possibly extract from the company, that they have nothing to gain by this. We only hope to avoid violence, intimidation to other employees, and that they'll let us continue to work in peace. You're working on mostly on